From the Toronto Star, I'm Raji Mudder, and this matters.
Sometimes you wanna go where everybody knows your name, and they're always glad you came. You wanna be where you can see our troubles are all the same. You wanna be where everybody knows your name.
I said it on yesterday's show. I like bars. I love the TV show Cheers. Although, as a nerd, if you forced me to choose, the fictional bar I'd most want to have a drink in is 10 Forward on the Enterprise. I've lived in bars. I've had nights when a DJ saved my life, and yes, sometimes I've needed to go home for a rest. But I haven't been in a bar since March 12th. And now, as much of Ontario is in stage 3 of reopening, with indoor dining in restaurants and bars allowed, the big question is whether this is a good idea or not. One of the things that has stuck with me during this pandemic is a study done in the US a month ago by JP Morgan Chase, which looked at credit card usage. It found that a surge in restaurant spending appeared to predict a surge in coronavirus cases weeks later. Of course, this is still very much a personal question. How safe do you feel going out to a bar or restaurant right now, even just to enjoy the patio? To discuss this, we are joined by Karon Liu. He's a culture reporter at The Star, but was also our former food writer, so we know he loves to cook and eat and is very good at both. He's been writing a lot about reopening and did a great piece about bars and restaurants that he'll discuss with us. Karon, thanks so much for being with us today.
Thanks for having me, Raju.
Okay, Karon, I don't want to stereotype us, but I'm probably more the drinker and you the eater of the pair of us. As much of Ontario is now in stage 3, bars and restaurants are now open for indoor dining. I know you talked to an expert, but let's just start off way more generally than that. What do you think about this?
I think I've pretty much resigned myself to takeout for the rest of the year. I've accepted that I probably won't be inside a restaurant anytime soon.
You talked to a microbiologist. What was her advice on what people should do when they actually brave going to a bar or restaurant?
What she said, it pretty much lines up with a lot of medical experts that have been talking about this with other publications, and that outdoor dining is still less of a risk than being inside. And that's because COVID-19, as far as we know, it's spread through, droplets coming out of your mouth when you talk and laugh and sneeze and stuff like that. And when you're in an indoor space that doesn't have as good of a ventilation or airflow as being outside, those droplets can travel 6 feet and get on other people. That's why if you have to dine inside, keep your mask on whenever you can. Keep that 2-meter distance away from anyone as much as you can. You just have to be on full alert, which is kind of why I don't want to dine inside a restaurant, because there's just too many potential risks and hazards that's just going to make dining not fun. I'd rather just get takeout so I can eat in the comfort of my own home.
Well, speaking as a drinker, one of the things that people have told me that happens to me is I start talking a little louder as time goes on. and getting obviously a little bit more social as I get refreshed. In other jurisdictions, bars and restaurants have already been pretty central to some outbreaks. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty ironic, I want to say, that on the same afternoon that Premier Ford announced that large swaths of Ontario will be moving into stage 3, California's governor announced that most indoor spaces, including bars and restaurants, are going to be shutting down for a second time after they reopened indoor dining, I think, back in April. And in Michigan, about a month ago, there was more than 100 outbreaks traced to one man who visited a bar. And over the Canada Day weekend, there was also an outbreak at a few bars in Montreal and in BC as well. So bars are basically being known as a hotbed right now for transmission because of those reasons that I outlined earlier. They're inside. A lot of times there's no airflow. And when you're drinking, you can't keep your mask on. And also when you're consuming alcohol, a lot of times it loosens your inhibitions. You might be a little bit lax on staying 2 meters away from each other. If there's music, if there's other people, you're talking louder. And when you're talking louder, there's probably going to be more air droplets coming out of your mouth and you're not wearing a mask because you're drinking, there's just a lot of risks involved in drinking inside.
You made this point earlier. Is going to these places going to be fun if you have to do all this stuff?
I know, like having to keep an eye out just all around you to make sure that there's a 2 meter radius of no one around you at all times. And if someone's moving, then do you have to also move away to make sure that there's that constant 2 meter separation? And then like what happens if you have to go to the restroom? The chances of contact contamination is still pretty low. I think the risk there is quite small, but at the same time, you're going to the restrooms, you're using the sinks, you're turning on the faucets. That stuff has like a very high contact rate from other people. And a lot of bars and restaurant washrooms that I know of don't have really good airflow or ventilation. So there's another risk there. I just be too paranoid to go to a bar or restaurant right now and have a good experience. And, you're seeing all the plexiglass dividers up, and then the servers are wearing their PPE. And the microbiologist that I spoke with, she was saying that if you have to dine in, like keep it short, don't linger in there for a long time. It doesn't sound very fun, to be honest. I would rather just get some takeout, tip extra well, and then just enjoy it at home or in a park somewhere where I can take my time. I don't have to wear a mask, and I'm not paranoid that someone's going to be coming into my 2 meter circle.
I know you know a ton about the restaurant industry. One of the things my friends and I have been talking about is the idea of reusable cups versus a place's dishware. I don't think there are any rules about this, but any thoughts on that? And the other weird one is like, should we be bringing back straws so we can use a drink with a face mask?
Yeah, there hasn't really been any clear-cut rules on any of that, but I think just using glasses and cutlery and stuff like that, I think it's fine for now. The way that restaurants wash it, it's usually in a dishwasher. It's heated to death. There's not going to be any viral transmission, or the risks are going to be very small. It's not something that people are terribly worried about.
Any thoughts on straws?
If you're that worried about keeping your mask on, just don't go into a restaurant.
Well, this is the other thing. I know you know a lot of industry folks, particularly on the restaurant side. What are they feeling? What are they talking? What are they saying about this sort of stuff?
They're of two minds. On one hand, a lot of workers, and I'm talking about employees, cooks, the people who aren't the owners and have to be on the floor and in the kitchens, a lot of them are, understandably quite worried because they're more or less frontline workers. For the servers, they're going to be in close proximity with a lot of people coming in. And then for a lot of the cooks, the way that kitchens are designed, physical distancing isn't really a possibility. And a lot of these cooks and servers, they have family at home. They're afraid that they would get something and then spread it to their families. But on the other hand, a lot of them are struggling to make ends meet and pay rent. So a lot of them have no choice but to get back to work.
I think the business side of this is incredibly important, but like with what we've seen with the premature reopening in the US, is this a good idea right now?
I think that's the struggle right now. It's kind of like, well, what do you prioritize more, the economy or people's health? Right? I think that's what it boils down to. I think if money wasn't an issue right now, a lot of businesses won't be opening. If people are financially secure, they would rather just stay home and ride it out. But right now, a lot of people don't have those options. And that's why they're going back to work and risking exposure right now. I mean, that's the overarching theme of a lot of these businesses reopening. A lot of them just need some sort of income to pay the rent and pay their employees, or just to put food on the table and keep a roof over their heads.
I think we saw a lot of bars and restaurants shift to takeout and to sort of adapt. I have to admit, I haven't gone anywhere, but as I'm riding around town, I've seen the expansion of the patios with the cafe TO programs, and sort of that's happening quickly and it looks neat. But I assume, talking to the industry, that's just not enough. These guys are still taking probably something close to like a 50% hit. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, actually, I spoke with a representative from the Canadian Federation of Independent Business, and they've been doing fairly regular, like either weekly or bi-weekly surveys with their members, about 3,500, 4,000 or so. They've been kind of just surveying them on how their businesses have been doing every week or every 2 weeks since the pandemic. And I believe in the hospitality sector across Canada, about 9% of them have reported making the same amount of money or more compared to previous years. And that's like the latest survey that they had for this week. So most of them are actually making a quarter or even less of what they made around the same time last year. So with capacity at, 50% or anything like that, they're making like a fraction of what they need to pay the rent and pay the bills. On a normal day, a restaurant needs to be at least 80-85% full in order to stay afloat. And that's one of the problems that a lot more people are seeing now in the restaurant industry, that it was never a sustainable industry because the seats have to be all filled in order for the restaurant to make money. And right now, when that's not a possibility, restaurants are just hemorrhaging money right now. And a lot of them have no idea when they're going to close or how long they can stay open right now because they're not making enough money to pay their bills, pay the employees, or pay themselves.
I think that's the other thing, too. We've already seen a number of places close. In my neighborhood, Prohibition shut down, and, that looked like a big successful place. What is the city's restaurant scene going to look like after this?
Yeah, I mean, it's anyone's guess right now. Every time that I speak with the restaurant owner and ask, like, what do you think things are going to be like a month or 2 months from now? And they're like, I don't even know what's going to happen next week. There's just so much uncertainty because as cliched as it is to say now, we are in an unprecedented time, and restaurants have always survived on slim margins and depended on having a full house. And when you take that out of the equation, it's kind of like, how long can people keep their heads above water at this point? So even though patios are open and a lot of restaurants across Ontario are getting ready for stage 3, it's still not enough seats being filled inside the restaurant to keep the lights on. So I think that there's going to be a lot more permanent closures coming down in the next few weeks and months. And yeah, it's scary and it's unfortunate.
I feel really bad for young people right now, particularly who live in condos, because I don't want to shame the people down on King West, but I've biked by there and the patios have looked really packed and doesn't seem to me like they're really respecting the physical distancing thing. Beyond that, there was also this incident, this Bar Goldie, which got busted for having people there. We talked about the industry wanting to open, but I think young people also just need a place to go right now.
Well, as a spokesperson for all millennials out there, I'm not a believer in shaming people for not practicing physical distancing. I think it speaks to the wider issue that a lot of condo dwellers and people who live in apartments, especially downtown, there's no access to green space, and that's on poor city planning. I think that if there were more green spaces, more parks for people to congregate safely, the issues of overcrowding parks and patios wouldn't be as much of a concern. But at the same time, there's still a pandemic going on. We shouldn't feel comfortable and let our guards down. We should be on high alert, and we should give up some personal sacrifices for, the health of everyone around us. It sucks that, we can't go to a patio or that we can't go to our favorite restaurants. But you know what? There's a pandemic going on. People are still dying. Maybe put off having a party for the next while because people are seriously dying right now. So things are uncomfortable because they're supposed to be. We're not in the clear yet.
This is maybe a little bit of a politics question. Do you think it's interesting that Doug Ford is putting sort of the emphasis on this as opposed to some other things? I can say, for one, as a parent, schools. But it's one of these things. Doug Ford has always been a very populist premier and has always been, shall we say, even though I believe he's a teetotaler, pro-booze. But do you think it's interesting that restaurants and bars are sort of opening now as opposed to some other things that perhaps should be focused on?
I'm sure you're alluding to schools as a thing that should be reopening. I myself, I don't have any children, so I haven't been in tuned with the reopening schools plan as much as friends and colleagues who do have children. I think part of the priority for a lot of jurisdictions, not just Ontario, but we're talking about other provinces and other states in the South. I think the big part of the reopening plans is to get the economy going again, because there isn't that good of a social safety net to pay people to stay home, essentially, right? So I think that there's this big impetus to get people spending again, to get people working again, because we don't have that good of a social safety net to be able to pay people to stay home, basically.
Well, I know my social life has just been turned upside down with this, and it's funny, there was no social life, but now it has been basically backyard hangs, because I'm lucky enough to have one of those and been going over to friends. What have you been doing? Have you been social at all, or are you still just basically staying in?
I'm naturally fairly antisocial, so I'm not doing that bad. And, I live in a suburb, so I do have backyard privilege, and, I live in a detached house, so I'm not getting cabin fever, and I live with my parents, so they're keeping me quasi-entertained / a little bit insane. So I have been doing fine. My partner, he lives in New Jersey, and we Skype for 2 or 3 hours every evening. So I'm not feeling lonely or anything like that, although most of my friends do live in downtown, so I haven't seen them since March. But I mean, to be honest, I'm pretty good. Like, I have access to green space. I don't live downtown, so I am able to get some fresh air and take a walk without worrying about coming into contact with large groups or people not wearing masks. So I'm pretty privileged. Yeah, I imagine it's very hard for people who don't have the luxuries that I do, that live in a high rise where they, don't get a lot of natural light, or that they're sharing a room with other people or other people in their family, and, have to take the TTC to get groceries or to go to work, and don't have a park or a parkette or any kind of square where they can kind of just get some exercise, get some fresh air. It's really hard, and I think that's the overarching thing that's coming out of this pandemic. It's really showing the cracks in our society and the widening gaps between the haves and have-nots. And that also relates to the restaurant industry and, just how flawed a business it is.
One of the things that I always remember used to do is you basically make all these runs around town and eat everywhere. Is there anything that you are missing? And is there a restaurant you're going to go to when you can or when you feel safe?
So I'm up in North York, so I'm just I've been getting takeout up here. I haven't been traveling downtown. But one thing I do miss a lot is this place called Tibet Kitchen in Little Tibet along Queen West, like the Parkdale area. And it's this beautiful Tibetan restaurant, and they do amazing momos, and they have like a beautiful back patio with like a big tree. I think their patio's open now, but it takes an hour and a half for me to get down there. So I love that place, but I don't think I'll be making a 3-hour round trip for a bunch of dumplings. But I think that's probably the first place I would go when I feel safe enough to, but that probably won't be for another few months.
Karon has been amazing for us. Is there anything that I didn't ask that you think that we should know?
Please keep reading The Star. Subscribe if you can. We have an excellent team of reporters, editors, and photographers who are doing just amazing coverage of the pandemic and the ongoing effects that it has on our economy, our society, the culture. Yeah, I think everyone at The Star just really stepped up, and I'm really proud of them all. And yeah, subscribe. And if you can't, remember that if you have a library card, you have access to The Star for free. So please don't reply to my tweets with a all caps paywall. If you have a library card, you can get The Star for free.
Karon, that is a great plug. I completely agree. I'm very proud of our team, and we are proud of you. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you. Stay sane.
Karon Liu is a culture reporter at the Toronto Star. That's it for today. Thanks so much for joining us. This Matters is hosted and produced by me, Raju Budler, Adrian Chung, and Saba Etisaz. Produced and mixed by Sean Pattenden, and our director of programming is JP Fozo. Our show theme music is by So Called, and our episode music is by Mike DeAngelis. We want to hear what stories matter to you. Please send us comments, questions, or ideas to thismatters@thestar.ca. Please consider supporting the journalism the Toronto Star newsroom does at thestar.com. And don't forget to subscribe to This Matters on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. Let's talk soon.